Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Philip. This is Ranger's Respite, and today we're looking at another whiskey library review. Today, I'm reviewing the Rittenhouse Bottled and Bond Straight Rye Whiskey. And there are two different bits of context that I need to talk about in order to effectively tell you about this whiskey. The first is, the one that like always pops up when you're talking about a bonded whiskey. What is bottled and bond? What is bonded when it comes to spirits within the United States? So, in the early days of whiskey production in the United States, there were people called rectifiers. Sorry, I got to start a little bit before that, I think. So, you've got distillers, blenders, rectifiers. A distiller makes the spirit. Early on in the days of whiskey in the United States, is primarily consumed unaged, or if it was aged, it was sort of as a byproduct of transportation. Um, Blenders would take distillate from more than one source, put them all together to blend them, obviously, to make a drinkable product. And frequently, blenders doubled as public houses, taverns, and the like. Um, and rectifiers would take distillate from distilleries, sometimes blends from pubs or taverns, but usually they were selling to pubs or taverns, and they would correct the whiskey. They'd basically add things to flavor it and stretch it out, etc. And that led to some quality issues with American whiskey in the early days. Daniel Whittington of the Wizard Academy, Whiskey Biscuits. I can't think of what his YouTube is called, and it's kicking my butt. He talks about rectifiers and rectifier recipes and stuff in a video. If I can find it, I will drop it down in the description down below. Suffice to say, it was kind of the Wild West. There were appellations, standards for what whiskey would be, but lots of workarounds, loopholes, and rectified whiskey was not a product that Americans were proud. Most Americans were proud to put their name on. So in 1897, Congress passed the Bottled and Bond Act of 1897, which has specific requirements. The one that everybody knows immediately is that bottled and bond means it's always bottled at 50% alcohol by volume. And that is important because it is a standard. That is, you pick up a bottled and bond bourbon, rye, corn whiskey, 50% alcohol by volume. It is aged a minimum of 4 years in a federally bonded warehouse. What does that mean? It means that the feds know what's in the warehouse. It's insured through a program that the feds sponsor, and they can verify the contents of those barrels. It is the product of one single distillery, one master distiller. It is a product of one distilling season, and it is it can be bottled by somebody other than the distiller, but it has to have the DSP of the distiller and the bottler on it, which is something that I wasn't aware of until I got my hands on a bottle of McTavish Spirits Bottled and Bond. This is the War Chief. Distilled by Midwest Grain Products, MGP. That's DSP IN 15016. Bottled by Coastal Pure Beverages LLC, DSP SC 15001. So this is a bottled and bond product, bottled at 50% alcohol by volume, product with a single distilling season, aged a minimum of 4 years in new charred oak barrels, but not bottled by the distiller. And that's sort of an interesting thing that, I wasn't aware of. Now, the second bit of context that's important for talking about this Rittenhouse bottled and bond rye is that you see Rittenhouse, or used to be, you saw Rittenhouse and rye on the context, or in the context of on that label, and you'd go, Pennsylvania whiskey, because Rittenhouse was historically a Pennsylvania brand, just like Old Overholt and a handful of other brands. Heaven Hill purchased Rittenhouse. Suntory bought, or I think it was Beam at the time, bought Old Overholt, and moved production from Pennsylvania to Kentucky, and there were some concessions made to mash bill and whatnot, which took them away from their Monongahela style rye roots. If you want to learn more about Monongahela rye, I think we talked about it during our interview with Jim Hoff of Liberty Pole, who make fantastic Monongahela style rye whiskey, as well as a peated rye whiskey, which is excellent. But how did that happen? Why did that happen? And it's sort of an interesting set of circumstances. You see, when Prohibition hit, there it was in the middle of a long-standing sort of a period of long-standing representation of a small set of senators from a certain region in America, where they really started solidifying their political power. And genuinely, it's one of those things that's complicated to talk about, but genuinely, the reason why Kentucky is the heart of American distilling is because essentially because of favoritism, bribery, and pork barreling. So basically, lawmakers from Tennessee and Kentucky were able to assist distillers in their who were their constituents in getting medicinal distillation licenses. Now, Abraham Overholt, I think his name was Abraham, the guy who ran Overholt Distilling in Pennsylvania, also managed to get one, but their production was decimated. And the distillers in Kentucky had the lion's share of these uh, medicinal distillation certificates, so they were able to more effectively uh, sort of centralize the distilling power of the United States within Kentucky. At one point in time, actually, Virginia had more distilleries than Kentucky, believe it or not. That's neither here nor there. But one of the things that happened was, like Pennsylvania, which had been the home or one of the homes of rye whiskey, was hit really hard. Most of the rye distilleries in Pennsylvania were just wiped out by Prohibition in a very brief period of time. And financiers and the distillers in Kentucky were able to buy the names and, in some cases, equipment and existing stock to get to build those brands out of Kentucky. So that's why you've got Overholt and Rittenhouse that are two Pennsylvania names, Pennsylvania brands that are no longer Pennsylvania brands, that are being produced out of Kentucky with mash bills that no longer really represent the Monongahela style. And now that I've talked your ears off about, the context of this whiskey, let's talk about this whiskey itself. Uh, this is genuinely one of my go-to cocktail rye whiskeys. This and the Old Overholt Bonded. On the nose, it is slightly sweet, a little bit of spice, like cloves, star anise, um, huh. caraway seeds a little bit, cinnamon, a little bit of caramel, a little bit of dustiness. It is a very approachable nose. A lot of people think of rye whiskey as being kind of mentally and sharp and maybe a little bit peppery, but that's in large part due to the majority of the rye that's on the market today. This is, I think, especially on the nose, an excellent introduction to rye whiskey for bourbon drinkers. On the palate, it is barrel influence forward. It's got that dusty tannic note, the caramel, a little bit of vanilla, and then that rice spice rolls over the palate. Again, caraway seed, um, star anise, a little bit of fennel, a little bit of like maybe coriander, um, sort of all the elements that make a good rye bread are in the palate on this. But the way is led by that barrel influence, and it's got some sweetness that undercuts that spice and takes away a lot of that like big bold character that made Monongahela rye. Which isn't to say that it's bad, it's just it's not the true Monongahela style. It does have a slight Sharpie-like note that I don't particularly enjoy, but it's not prominent. Really kind of only shows on the edges of the palate. And what you primarily get is a nice, relatively well balanced, if not slightly oak forward rye whiskey. I find the Rittenhouse to be a little bit drying in the mouth. I think that it's probably bottled much closer to the minimum of 4 years old, and that isn't necessarily a bad thing. There are plenty of 4-year-old whiskeys that are very good, but at this proof point, at that age, this particular whiskey is a little bit sharp, a little bit drying in the mouth. But I think probably the worst part of this whiskey is the finish. In a good rye whiskey, in the finish, you want that like herbalness, the spice to really linger, or maybe a little bit of like sweetness to just touch it around the edges. This really does fade so quickly to just like roasty caramelly notes and barrel cannons, and it doesn't have the rich complexity that I really like in my rye whiskeys. And I have a very strong fondness for rye whiskeys that is partially born out of my love for Catoctin Creek. There are a few distilleries that I love more. Um, I I really love Catoctin Creek, and I really love their rye. It's 100% rye whiskey. There are many other ryes. Liberty Pole, I love. Old Overholt's pretty good. The Balcones rye is very different, but very good. Bare Knuckle rye is fantastic. Um, all of these are fantastic rye whiskeys that I love. Uh, don't tell Doug, but probably my favorite Lost Lantern products are the ryes. Although that may change if I ever get my hands on the Scotch Lovers collection. So I think I covered the finish on this. I'm going to talk about it again a little bit. It's very short. It's It's not as short as the Four Roses single barrel, but it doesn't hang around. It doesn't really warm you on the inside. It's just kind of there and gone. And I don't particularly enjoy that. And since it's already been 15 minutes, I'm going to ask and answer those three questions that I always do. One, do I like it? Yeah, this is a pretty good ride, especially for the price. It's under $30. It's hard to beat that, especially since rye whiskey tends to be a little bit more expensive. Two, do I think it's a good value? Yeah, for under $30, it's a pretty good value. Um, what does it go up against? Old Overholt Bonded, frankly, Jim Beam Rye, and a couple of others in a similar price point, and I think that it compares favorably in that showing. It's not really a standout, but it does hold its own. And it is quite good. And the third question: do I recommend it? Yeah, especially for cocktail usage. If you have tried, say, a 95.5 rye, like, say, Templeton Bullet, Redemption, and you found it to be a little too minty, and a little too peppery, specifically like a ground black pepper note, I recommend trying Rittenhouse. I think it's perfectly fine, especially for cocktails. Um, And with that out of the way, coming up tomorrow. Whoops, that's the wrong sample. Eventually, I'll grab the right one. Coming up tomorrow on Lost Lantern Saturday, we're going to be looking at the 888 10-year-old out of the Scotch Lovers collection. And I'm really excited for that, and I hope you guys enjoy that. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please like the video, share it with your friends who may be looking for a good affordable cocktail rye. Um, uh, let me know what you think of Rittenhouse Bottled and Bond, and do you have any cocktail ryes or even neat sipping ryes that you recommend that you think I may not have tried? Um, as always, I would love if you guys subscribed. You can support the channel by buying pens from my Etsy shop. If you want to learn about American single malt whiskey, I co-host the Single Malt Frontier. Yesterday, we did an interview with a really cool guy named Jace Marty. He is the master distiller at Black Frost Distilling in New Ulm, Minnesota. You got to see me eat crow and apologize and correct my driving directions to New Ulm. With all of that out of the way, thank you guys for tuning in. If you stayed this long, I really appreciate it. As always, until next time, stay happy, stay geeks, sláinte.